Good evening, I'm Joe Skrzyszewski, and thanks for tuning in to First News at 6. Minot Mayor Tom Ross delivered his first State of the City address today, touching on topics from flood protection to the new City Hall to mental health. Tom Ross shared a message of unity in his first State of the City address as mayor of Minot. A key topic in his presentation, ongoing flood protection efforts. Ross recently testifying before state lawmakers, pushing to secure long-term funding from the legislature for the next 5 biennia to complete the project sooner than later.
If we stay on the current timeline, this project won't be completed well into the 2040s. But if we can get increased funding from our North Dakota legislature, we can bring that down to 2035.
Ross touted the progress of several other major projects in Minot, many of which will be completed this year. The new City Hall downtown, Trinity Health's new medical campus on the southwest end of town, the Magic City Discovery Center on North Hill, and the city's 5th fire station.
This year, that project will become reality when Station 5 opens for service in Northwest Minot.
The mayor also putting an emphasis on mental health for first responders, following the recent loss of Minot police officer Patrick Blanchard. He also announced he'd be working with other city leaders to address the growing issue of cyberbullying among youth, which resonated with parents in the audience.
I'm excited to see that he's pulling all kinds of different people to the table, including students, to see what we can do to prevent this from causing any kind of a tragedy in our community.
Ross also took time to recognize several members of the community, including sanitation worker Harold Martin, who was recently recognized for his customer service, 2 airmen on Minot Air Force Base who became naturalized citizens, and J.J. Franks, the Bishop Ryan student who went viral for hitting that half-court shot. Ross also announced intentions to launch a Minot Hall of Fame, recognizing civic leaders throughout the years who played pivotal roles in the development of the city.